Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway.
Welcome back to Paris History, Avec, Hemingway, and today we're talking about Parc Monceau. And that might not be a park you visited. It's not really on the tourist trail. A lot of locals go there every day. When I go by, somebody is running in there, lots of somebodies. And they're quite aggressive, too, when you're trying to do a photo shoot. Stay out of their way. They will run you over. But today we're going to learn the history of this beautiful park, and I definitely recommend you visit on your next trip, and Claudine will tell you why.
Yeah, it's a beautiful park. And it's funny about those runners because you see that especially in the morning or, into like early midday on a weekend at like the Luxembourg and the Tuileries. But the Parc Monceau, because it's kind of an oval, it's kind of a natural track. And you got to go in the same direction. Like, I just want to see somebody running going the opposite direction because I think all chaos would ensue.
They get really angry.
They do, and it's kind of like, you see like mothers with their kids in strollers and stuff, and it's like, let's all share the road, guys.
Yeah, seriously. They treat it like it is a highway. I'm like, this is a park. Calm down.
Yeah, they do get pretty annoyed. But Parc Monceau itself is absolutely beautiful, and it's off the beaten track. It's off kind of you can get a view towards the Arc de Triomphe, so it's not that far away, but it's absolutely beautiful. Parc Monceau itself was basically created under Louis-Philippe d'Orléans, who was the Duc de Chartres, and he was also known as Philippe Égalité. He was the Prince of the Blood. He was born April 13th, 1747, and he died on November 6th, 1793 at the guillotine.
Oops.
He is a descendant of Louis XIV and the Madame de Montespan, who we've talked about before, who was, his favorite. She was the one that tried to that was poisoning him for years. They had quite a few children, and so most of them they were all legitimized under when he got with his next courtesan wife. And so that was good because they think that he had more than 20 illegitimate children.
Wow, he's busy.
Louis XIV. As a cousin of Louis XVI, he voted for his death. Upon inheriting the Palais Royal from his father at his death, he added all of the shops and the cafes, and that's when it started to become the center for all of that scandalous activity that was going on. And because the Palais Royal that we've talked about before was a royal structure, the police couldn't go there. So that's why there was the gambling and the prostitution. He his father was Louis Philippe. He was also convicted of treason and arrested in 1793. He was tried, imprisoned, and sentenced to death, and that is when he was killed by the guillotine less than a month after Marie Antoinette. But in 1769, he had this property outside of Paris created to include a lovely French garden. In 1773, he changed the entire thing in order to outshine Versailles. He added an Anglo-Chinese style garden. And usually like the English gardens are more like anything goes. A French garden is very geometric. Like we talked about the Tuileries last week. Everything is very lined up. Everything is very perfect. An English garden is like, let's just plant it and let it all go.
Be wild.
Which is still very lovely. It was over 50 acres in size. He had Italian artist, Louis Carmitella, who created all of the folies, and those are all of the fun little structures that filled the garden. There's a few left today. After his death, the garden fell back into the normal property holdings of the state, and in 1802, it fell into the hands of his descendants. It went back to them, which a lot of the things during the Revolution were able to do. They tore down most of the folies, including there was a windmill, there was a vineyard, there was these really beautiful tents that were set up. They sold it for a short period of time. Then they bought it back again in 1819. But it was in the mid 19th century under Haussmann and Napoleon III when they decided to take away many of the acres that surrounded there, cutting it away and changing it down to, it just included 20 acres. Gabriel Davio created the beautiful parts of it that when you see the gates of it, the gates are absolutely gorgeous. They're like black iron and topped with all this gold. They're beautiful. There is a little bridge there that's kind of a bridge like you'd see in Venice. There is a cave. There's a waterfall. There is a pond, which we'll tell you about. But in 1861, it was two brothers known as the Perrier brothers who owned and bought a lot of the grounds that surrounded it, the former acres of it, and started building these grand mansions. Around the garden is where there was homes of the Rothschilds. There was the Camados and the Sanishi, which is we'll tell you about those. But it was during the Bloody Week of 1871, that the week of the Commune, the Bloody Week, they had executions that happened in the garden. So it's not exactly the most lovely thought of the history of that garden. But many artists over time have painted it, including Monet and Caillebotte.
No surprises there.
No surprises. It's really beautiful. It's a really, really beautiful garden. Inside it, and just right there on the edge. So they have all these beautiful gates that go around. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. And on one of them in all of them, they have the streets are after artists. So there's the Avenue Van Dyck, which is named for the artist Antoine Van Dyck, who was born in Antwerp in 1599. He was a Baroque painter, and he ended up a court painter in England for Charles I. On that corner is one of the most beautiful buildings, and you can't completely see it. You can only see a little bit of it from the fence, and then you can see it when you're in the park. You kind of look back on it. But it's the Hotel Meunier. It was built in 1867 by Henri Parent, who also built the beautiful Musée Jacquemin-André in the Second Empire style. The facade has sculptures by Jules Dalou, who was a huge sculpture artist that has created a bunch of different monuments, including ones of Louis XIV in Paris. It was built for Émilie Justin Meunier. He was born in 1826. He died in 1881 in Noiselle, outside of Paris. He was the son of Antoine Meunier, and so he was a pharmacist who created the Meunier Chocolate Company. Have you heard of that chocolate before?
I have. I mean, as a huge fan of chocolate, you're talking to the right chocolate.
It's like now owned by Nestle. But the story of the company is really, really cool. His father died in 1853, and Emily took up tried to increase the production of their factory that they had outside of Paris in Noiselle. It sits right on the banks of the Marne. His father had built this factory, and I've been to it. I've been to the outside of it. It's really cool. But what he also did, and it's going to remind you of a very famous story that was one that I love from my childhood. But he had this chocolate factory, and he created basically a town. And so he would create housing. He had a post office. They had stores. They had doctors. They had everything you needed because he would take care of all of his employees by taking care of them and having all this. And, it also kept him close to work. Yeah. But it is said that is the basis of Willy Wonka.
No way, that's really cool.
Yeah, so Ron Dahl, it was slightly inspired by it, they say. He never said in history if, that was what he did. He's gone now. But that was they say that was a pretty huge influence on him. When I was a kid, that was my favorite book, and I remember watching the movie, and I still will watch it if I find out it's on. But that was like, I read that book probably 20 times when I was a kid. I absolutely loved it. And
Isn't
so
it kind
going there, seeing the outside was really cool.
the book is much grimmer than the movie, isn't it? It's like,
It is
wow.
like all of his books are a little, and then he had the second one, which was like Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, and they like the elevator takes off and they go through space and stuff. But the Chocolate Factory one's the best one, and then not the John. If you watch the movie, you got to watch the Gene Wilder one, not the Johnny Depp one. It's got to be the original.
Not the same.
Gene Wilder is the best, but his son, he had this beautiful house built there, and then now it's supposedly apartments.
What?
Yeah, I got to find out how to live there.
Yeah, how do we
But
get in there?
inside, I know, get it. I got to get inside, and like I wonder if you could like lick the wallpaper, like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
We won't try it.
They would be like, "What is that weird lady doing?"
Eating the wallpaper.
But inside the garden, you also have, of course, a bunch of statues. There is a monument to Chopin. Chopin is playing the piano. He's sitting on the piano. Is a muse. Is his muse. It was done by Jacques Froment Maurice in 1849. There also is the rotunda, which is by basically kind of the main gate of the garden. It was done in 1787. It was known as the Pavillon de Chartres. It was done by Claude Nicolas Ledoux. It was part of the Farmers General Wall that was there to collect taxes. The upper level was done specifically for the Duke, so he had this fancy little apartment above the rotunda that he could look out over his garden, and now there are public toilets in there. So it's probably one of the fanciest places to go to use the bathroom.
Toilets.
Yeah, the dome itself on top was added in 1861 by Gabriel Davout, but it is pretty cool. Catherine, if you go from there, and kind of keep going, if you have the rotunda to your back, go left. You go through a little path. On the right, you're going to see the little bridge that is basically inspired by Venice. And keep going, and you're not going to miss it. But there's another little kind of pond, and around it is a colonnade. And so this colonnade was done by Catherine de Medici. She wanted to have a monument built next to the Basilique Saint-Denis, which is where all the kings and queens are buried. She wanted to have this basilique created, and this was the Rotonde de Valois, done in 1568. In 1586, construction stopped on it. In 1589 is when Catherine died, if you listened to last week, next to Saint-Germain. It stopped at the second level. So just past the rotund, if you head over there, you'll find a colonnade. And this was by Catherine de Medici because she wanted to have a monument built at the Basilique Saint-Denis that was dedicated to the Valois family. The Valois was their whole string you have all these different ones of the history of France. There's the Bourbons is the one kind of everybody knows. They came after them. But it was the Valois. In 1568, construction stopped in 1586. She died 3 years later in 1589. It stopped at the second level of the rotund. In 1621, under the Bourbons, a temporary roof was added, but it was never fully completed. In 1719, they decided to demolish it, but portions of it were kept, and that is what was moved to here to the garden in 1769. Which is really cool. It took me years ago, I was trying to figure out where those even came from and the story behind it, and it was almost impossible, and now it seems like that story's everywhere.
Yeah, and it's so pretty for photos. It does look very old, and they were doing a lot of work to it for a moment.
Yeah, they had their last time I think I saw it, they had a lot of scaffolding around it, but there's a really pretty little park that's in front of it, or little pond, I should say. And it's basically called a Nomache. It's an ancient Roman basin that they used to host like mini naval combats in. So
What? That's so small. I can't imagine.
I know.
That.
So, but it's like take like, maybe the boats that you see in the Luxembourg, and then maybe now they're just like, warcraft vessels.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah. I know they're not like giant boats. But when you walk past and walk around the colonnade, you're going to walk on a path, and right there under over the path is a arcade that was from the Hotel de Ville, which we're going to tell you more about in a couple of weeks. But it was also like, just like what we said about the Tuileries last week, it was, the Hotel de Ville was destroyed during the Commune. And so that is a piece of it right there. It was from the ground floor of the facade. And it's there's two pieces of it within the garden. Also there you'll find a little pyramid that we talked about the pyramid of the Louvre last week. The park was once filled with all of these things that were all done by, as I said, the Italian architect. He was a set designer as well, who had a talent for creating these little illusions. So they were architectural themes, and they're called follies. He was worked with a German landscape architect, and also the French architect Bernard Pouet. And so they filled the garden with all these little things, like the pyramid. There's still a Japanese lantern done out of stone. It was built in 1786. It wasn't installed until 1986 as a symbol of friendship from the Pact of 1982 between Paris and Tokyo. There's columns from the Tuileries there. The very center of it, when you walk down, there's the oval around it where all the very avid, somewhat mean runners are.
Very mean.
And then down the center is the Allée de la Comtesse de Séjour, and she was the one that we did the podcast episode about. That, remember, she was the one that she was like 50 years old and decided to start writing children's stories for her grandkids, and then she published them. And so that alley is named after her. Also in the garden is a monument to Ambrose Thomas, and it was by the Grotto. He was a French composer. As a child, he learned music from his father, who was a violinist, and his mother was a singer. At 16, he enrolled in the Paris Conservatory. Later in life, he was a professor. And so he was widely popular at the time under Napoleon III. There is also a monument to Alfred de Musset, that was placed in 1906. He was a French poet and a novelist, but he was mostly known, and we've talked about him before, because he was involved in a relationship with George Sand, when we talked about George Sand. The little bridge, as we mentioned before, the little Rialto Bridge was done as like a little homage to Venice. There's also Guy de Maupassant in the garden, and he also had, in one of his stories, he talked about that little bridge. There's also a monument to Charles Gounod, who was born on the Rue Saint-André des Arts in Saint-Germain. He was a French composer as well. The whole place is filled with a bunch of really cool little statues and monuments to all of the people that lived. A lot of them lived in that area at one point. And so it's kind of nice that they have all these little places that kind of dot around there in the garden itself, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, just it's beautiful in general. Yeah. I love that park. Besides the mean runners.
Yeah, when you do walk out, when you do go out the very far corner, you will see a plaque that is the parachute. It has a parachute on this just kind of bronze plaque. It's dated on October 22nd, 1797. A gentleman named André Jacques Garvenier, who was a pilot of a hot air balloon during the French Revolution. He was captured in Belgium by the Austrians, where he stayed for 3 years. And while he was there, he worked up the plans to construct a parachute. The first parachute jump happened on October 22nd, 1797. Andre leapt from this hot air balloon, landing in the Parc Monceau. It was the very first time anybody ever did this. On October 12, 1799, he and Jeanne Lambros, his future wife, was the first woman to then go and do that same exact thing. And there is the little plaque there that marks the exact spot where that happened.
I have to find it.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's there. Watch out though, because it's right there where all the where the runners are. But when you do walk out, there is also there's a few museums in the area, and they're definitely ones that you definitely want to go and check out. There is the Boulevard Malesherbes. That is where you're going to find the Musée Carnegie that was open in 1898. It holds more than 10,000 pieces from the personal collection of Carnegie. He was he was involved in owning the Louvre department store. That is right there across in the Louvre that they're doing a ton of work on right now. And if you go out and around the corner, there is one of my favorite places that you have to visit. I'm not sure if you've been here before. Have you been to the Musée de Camado?
No, never been there.
Oh my gosh, you have to go. So there's the Rue de Monceau, which runs basically kind of right along the edge of the park, and you see the back of these beautiful houses from the inside the garden. But the Musée Monceau, or Camado, sorry, was done and owned by Moise de Camado. He inherited his parents' home on the edge of the Parc Monceau. And he had their home demolished and built a new one that is, he wanted a version of the Petit Trianon that's out at Versailles. Architect René Serge designed the Petit Trianon, the Petit Trianon in 1912. Commodore was originally born in Turkey, and he was part of a very large banking family. He was a huge lover of art, and he was a collector. He created this massive collection that he rarely let anyone inside his house to see. Moss and his brother Isaac had different tastes. Moss wanted more of everything from the 18th century. He really loved anything that was Louis XIV to Louis XVI. Isaac was more classic. Upon Isaac's death, his collection was donated to the Louvre, and I see on the plaques where it'll say like it was from his collection. Also, a lot of the stuff in the Orsay, he loved a lot of the Impressionists. Moss intended to leave his home and his whole collection to his son, Nissim, who died in 1917 at 26 years old during World War I in an air accident. Moss was devastated. Yeah, it's really sad, and everything in there, you'd get all those reminders of him. He was just absolutely devastated. He decided to leave everything to the Musée des Arts Décoratifs. He died in 1935, thankfully before World War II. And it was on November 14th when he died. He had very specific instructions down to the smallest details that everything in his house had to be left exactly the way he had it. And each room and the way the art and all of the objects were left had to stay exactly the same.
Wait, what? Exactly the same? That's kind of difficult.
Well, most of it, you have Nelly Jacquemart, then Jacquemart Andre, she did the same thing. They all say that you have to leave it intended how it was. Of course, they do some things because for flow of traffic and safety and, getting people so they can walk inside these rooms and out. The Commodore, the rooms are smaller. The Jacquemart Andre, obviously, the rooms are a little bit larger. But they do have to keep it like as it was. So what's really cool is that you go into these spaces and you really literally just walk right into their life. You walk into the life of whoever it was that owned that collection and that home. They had the story of his son and his, he was so devoted to his son, but he also had a daughter. And her story is pretty amazing. And there is a fantastic book, and I'll link it. And I think it's called The Hidden Things. I'll link it. It's this amazing book about, it really takes place there in the Monceau because it's about the three major Jewish families and what happened to their art collection during World War II. And the Commodores and the Rothschilds play a huge part in this. And so you learn a lot more about his daughter, which I want to do a whole podcast episode just about the Commodores because it's really interesting. But in 1940, they ended up packing up the entire museum and moving it down to the Chateau de Valençay to protect it because they were a Jewish family and he had this mass collection. And of course it was going to be, in the top 10 list of the Germans to steal everything. But it's really, really like nobody goes there. It's really quiet. You kind of go there and you walk through and it's beautiful and you get this beautiful view out into the garden. And They now have a cafe at there's part of the building that his brother owned. There's now a cafe there. So I can't wait to go back and check it out. But they've also used it, like they've used the exterior in that TV show Lupin, that's on Netflix. But it's really like, it's just such a beautiful place. And the collection is really amazing. There's one room that just is filled with dishes, and it's like the best.
The room with dishes is the best.
Yeah. But they're like beautiful painted pottery dishes. They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll go one day. Look at some dishes.
You should definitely go.
Well,
it's really beautiful.
When I'm dodging runners, I'll be thinking of our podcast and like all the fascinating things there.
Maybe we should add on to the end of this is screaming like, get out of our way. Then you can just play it really loud.
Yeah, play it loud like I'm walking here.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, make sure you check out Claudine's website, ClaudineHemingway.com, and tune in next week.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.